welcome to Rencore Ignite 2021. This is a recap of the fall edition of Microsoft Ignite, which just happened. It's still ongoing, so today we'll recap some of the things that we so far has heard and read about from the announcements of Microsoft Ignite. Today I have with me Maarten Eekels and Jussi Roine. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So hopefully today we'll get a chance to, well, I will probably ask you a couple of questions about your favorite announcements and you will digest some of those. I know there was a lot of things discussed at Ignite. Hopefully we'll be able to shed some light on some of the cooler things that we saw at Ignite. I know there's a long list of things coming out. I took a look into the Microsoft 365 blogs. I took a look at the Ignite schedules, took a look at on the Azure side on some Azure updates. There's a long list of things going on. So I think it's good with kind of a call like this, we sit together and kind of talk about the favorite things that we picked up. Because I'm pretty sure the favorite things that I picked up on will be different from what you picked up on based on your experiences. So before we kick into that, why don't I hand over to both of you to introduce yourselves? So let's start with Maarten.
All right, well, thanks for having me, first of all. My name is Maarten Eekels. I live in the Netherlands and I'm CTO of Rapid Circle, a Microsoft Cloud implementation partner. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and regional director. And I like wine.
There we go. So if we have time at the end of the call, I'm pretty sure I have questions about that topic as well. Thank you, Jussi.
Yes, thank you for having me as well. Great to be here. My name is Jussi Roine. I'm based in Helsinki, Finland. I'm the CEO of our small company called North Advisors. So what keeps me up at night and during the day is all things Azure and Power Platform. I also like wine, but I often trust that Mart gets to select the wine. But Lego is probably the #2 top like that I have.
Okay, so again, if we have time at the end, we'll talk about wine and Legos. Sounds like a great combo. Okay, so let's dive just straight into this because I know there's a long list of things that were announced, and I know you have a lot of things to talk in this topic alone. So I'm just going to hand it over to Maarten. What is your top one thing coming out of Ignite that should be noteworthy for anyone listening in?
Yeah, I think this one was hard to miss, and it's also one of the announcements that I maybe struggle a little bit with mostly myself. That's Mesh for Microsoft Teams, which they have announced, and I think last Ignite and the edition that we had before this one was already, and it was a lot about Altspace VR and a lot of Mesh experiences that were being launched there, and immersive spaces, avatars, all the kinds that we have when it comes to augmented and virtual reality. And now Microsoft announced that they're bringing this to Microsoft Teams as well. And this is typically something that I struggle with a little bit, because do I see myself with an avatar joining an actual business meeting? I'm not too sure about that. So a regular business meeting, sitting on a table with avatars, it's a bit hard for me to comprehend and to see the real value of that. But on the other hand, I can definitely see the value of avatars and this immersive experience when it comes to, for example, all hands or broader company meetings where you maybe want to have small groups of people talking to each other in a virtual reality. And so there are definitely use cases where I can see this pop up and making and really getting value out of it. But in terms of regular business meetings, I don't know. Maybe I have to flip that switch in my head for that to really happen. And maybe I will love it and it's a cool experience. But it's a little bit awkward for me to see myself sitting at the table as an avatar instead of myself.
Yeah, so we're perhaps not there yet where you do the budget reviews in Excel in a virtual 3D landscape.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows in the future? But I know there was a couple of conferences this year and last year that were in Alt VR and these 3D landscapes. And for that purpose, I think it's pretty cool. Because you can walk around and mingle, if you will, with the other attendees. At the same time, you can take part, just like you mentioned, for an all-hands type of meeting where someone is talking to everyone, but not where everyone perhaps is part of the dialogue. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, and to recap that, the name was Microsoft Mesh, right?
Mesh for Microsoft Teams. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is I need to ask here. So I did see the keynote and I did see the demo and Mesh for Microsoft Teams, but perhaps to Mart, do you see that Mesh is metaverse by Microsoft, or is metaverse something bigger and Mesh is an implementation of something to metaverse?
Well, metaverse in itself is, I think, quite big. We've also seen, for example, the Facebook announcement that they will change their top-level company name to Meta. So metaverse in itself is really something that is popping up here and there. And Microsoft has its own ideas around metaverse. And of course, Microsoft is about collaboration and productivity. And that's where they try to let that metaverse step in and make it a collaborative environment and really immersive. And I think a Mesh for Microsoft Teams is an implementation of the metaverse as Microsoft sees it. So a place where you can collaborate, and the platform to collaborate for Microsoft is Teams. So it really makes sense to bring that metaverse and to bring that immersive experience to Microsoft Teams. So before this, you had to go to Altspace VR and join there, and now you can do that right from Teams. I think that's the big advantage that Microsoft made possible through this mesh in Microsoft Teams.
All right, sounds good. I'm really looking forward to seeing more on what that means and to see if companies actually kind of embrace this kind of virtual experience of meetings and see how that goes and how it fits into our kind of daily business models. So I'm skeptic, but excited to learn more about it when that becomes available. Okay, Jussi, what's your number one?
There's so many to choose from. Sadly, Mart took the Mesh one, so I can pick that one. But I'm leaning on a Power Platform. So out of all of the updates that we got during Ignite, there's quite a bit on Power Platform, and perhaps the big umbrella update for me was that Power Platform is now maturing to be a cloud-based set of services and capabilities for the real Fusion teams. So you have the professional developers, you also have the non-developers, and now the pro devs actually have the tooling for Power Platform. So we did get the command line admin tool for Power Platform some time ago this year, but now there's support for GitHub code spaces, so that you can spin up your code space and it will have the Power Platform tooling for you. That's one. The second one is that you have Windows Subsystem for Linux support for the Power Platform tools. So now you can, at least in theory, we'll see how this pans out in the future, but at least in theory, you can pick up a pro developer who's used to using Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio and doing all sorts of fancy things, and ask them to implement the side of the customization for Power Platform that's not reasonable to do with Power Apps or Power Automate or Power BI, and then have them hand over that solution to a non-developer to utilize that sort of feature. So this could be a custom connector or a custom component or something else. So as I said, I feel the umbrella here is that Microsoft is filling the gaps that we had with Power Platform that pro devs were sort of asking for or hoping to become available for them to make it worthwhile to invest their time and skills in Power Platform.
Okay, that I entirely missed all of those announcements during Ignite. So I already feel now 9 minutes in, it's valuable to get this insight. I really like the integration with GitHub Code Spaces because I didn't actually know that was a thing they were working on. WSL or Windows Subsystem for Linux support, also interesting. And I guess this is kind of a step in the direction of the Fusion Dev that Microsoft is also betting a lot of money on. You can see everywhere they're talking about Fusion Dev teams, the Fusion Dev experience, where you're not a traditional dev. You're not a no-code, low-code dev, but it's all Fusion now. So you can build the UIs and you can build like rapid prototyping on the Power Platform, and then you can do the business logic with connectors, and you can do some really advanced stuff with a traditional development approach. So this was news to me with GitHub Codespaces. I'm super excited. So now I don't know if I can just leave the call now and go play around with that. So that's super cool. Looking forward to trying that out as well. So, all right, Maarten, what's next on your list?
I think around Microsoft Teams. So we talked about Mesh for Teams, which is really big, but there are so many small features that were announced for Teams that will just make our lives more simple. So that equals better, I guess. It's convenience, right? So it's a couple of examples that I saw came by. For example, you will now have the raise hand feature in Teams. But what they will add is that you can see the order in which order people raise their hand. So you will be able to pick the one who raised his hand first and then go to the second and the third one. Just small things, but really nice. I saw a feature where you can delay sending your a chat message. So you're sending something to someone, and then you can delay that in order to make sure that you don't disturb someone at night, for example. So you're sending that out in the morning. Of course, I know there's people who deliberately send it out at night because they want to make sure that you notice them working late. So this feature, you can also use that feature to send it out during the night while you actually type the chat message during the day. So there's something in it for everyone, I guess. But I like it. Chat to self is a really nice one. So you can finally send chat messages to yourself to make notes, right? I used to do that with email all the time, right? Always sending myself an email with stuff that I needed to do, and now
I do that every day.
yeah, exactly. Now you can do that in Teams. There's a chat with personal accounts. I like that. So we already had Teams for personal life, but it was Teams. It looked exactly the same as Teams, but it was separate. You could not mingle the two with the Teams for business accounts and the Teams for personal accounts, and they've announced that you now can. So you can start chatting with people with a personal account or even just a phone number. And two really big ones that I see in Teams working together with other applications. So the first one is that they are going to make the Teams chat available in Power Apps. So you can bring a Teams chat box to a Power App and have a chat there right from your Power App. So that's a really cool one. And what they also announced is the Azure Communication Services Teams Interoperability, which is a mouthful of saying that you can now bring the meeting experience of Teams, you can take it out of Teams and put it in your own code. So you can write your own application and bring a Teams meeting experience into your own application. I think that's really, really cool as well. So now you can really start building your own business apps or customer apps and integrate the Teams meeting experience right in there. Super cool.
That sounds pretty interesting. And I know we talked about that at one point, you see, in our other podcast about Azure Communication Services and how businesses could integrate that into their, streamlining their experience for the customers so they could chat with support or things like that. And with this integration, then if you get the full Teams experience by doing that, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
I need to pick up on the chat with self because I always use that same approach that I send myself an email. But what happens in my life is I type in the email, I send it, then my phone notifies me, oh, there's a new email. Oh, who emailed me? then I see myself, oh, it's my own email. So I'm fairly certain that with this capability, I will chat with myself and then the phone will pling and I will open, oh, it's a message from myself because you forget the moment you push it out.
You're so popular.
Yeah, that could be it.
And I also read, related to that, I also read somewhere that we'll get some new emojis. And I saw a screenshot from the announcement of that as well. And one of the key things, and it can be a pretty small thing to many, but we came from Slack and we moved into Teams before we started using it. And there was an unlimited supply of emojis, and you could actually upload your own as well. Moving into Teams, we had 5, 6, I don't know exactly.
Six,
just a bunch of them. So the way to express ourselves even in the business context today, is a lot easier with emojis. We do it all the time in our teams. We have our custom emojis. We use the Windows shortcuts today, like Windows period, I think, brings up the Windows emoji thing. But getting that as a reaction directly to messages is pretty cool. And I know it's appreciated by a lot of people who you can express quite a lot of more things with a smiley, a happy smiley or a sad smiley or something else entirely different than perhaps you can with words. So I really like that. It's a small change, but definitely welcome.
Yeah, I agree.
So let me pick on something else. Perhaps briefly first on something a bit larger in the sense of Power Platform, and then something on the Microsoft 365 side. So Power Apps has now the pay-as-you-go model. So that's the third licensing model now, and not accounting for the sub-licensing models that you have. And what caught my eye here is that now there's a capability of ingesting that cost from Power Platform to Azure, meaning that you can control that cost in Azure Cost Management. You can have the billing profiles, you can do the cost allocations, you can do budgets, everything in terms of what Azure gives you. But then users will be using Power Apps and they can leverage the premium features and build more fancier apps without needing to worry about licensing that much. So that's a bit like what I mentioned before with Power Platform, with the umbrella term, and now I feel Power Platform is moving towards or closer to Azure in this sense as well. But then something else, and I did not see this during the keynote, so I actually had to go through the book of news a bit more in depth to find this. So Windows 365, that we got a couple of months ago as a trial, so that you can run a managed virtual machine as part of Microsoft 365 for a fixed price. So Windows 11 support is now there. This is great. But also that there's a grace option now. So normally it's 7 days. If you allocate a VM, let's say to Toby, and then Toby says, well, I don't need that anymore, there's a 7-day grace period until you get rid of that. Now you can put that to 0, meaning let's get rid of this cost immediately. So happy to see Windows 365 evolve, because plenty of customers might not necessarily need the complexity of Azure Virtual Desktop, but just want the VMs up and running. And now it seems to be much more manageable in that sense.
All right. I really like that. All right, Maarten, what's up on your list?
So something else that I've been talking about quite a bit during Ignite in the keynote as well is Loop, Microsoft Loop, which I was like, another app. So let's see what it does. But it's quite cool, and I think it's the first maybe real application implementation of the Fluid framework that Microsoft announced quite a while ago already. And the Fluid framework, for people who don't know, is a framework where you can see real-time changes in objects or in components. So whenever I change something in a table, in a chat message in Teams, then the other party or in the same part of the same chat will see that change right away, straight away, immediately. So it's really nice. But I think the actual valuable examples of the Fluid framework were maybe we were able to count those on one hand or maybe two hands, but there were not that many, I think. And now Microsoft has built this application, and it's a little bit like a framework as well, because the components, the Loop components, you can build those Loop components yourself, and because that's based on the Fluid framework. And with those Loop components, you can build a Loop page with different Loop components on it. So you can have a list or tables or a notes or a couple of notes. But you can also include, for example, sales opportunities or a customer record from Dynamics 365. You can bring that all together onto a page, and you can even seclude certain components for certain people. So this is only visible for those people, and the rest is visible for everyone. And you can even create a Loop workspace where you, I guess, bring in multiple pages with multiple components. So it's kind of a small environment where you collect everything related to, for example, a project or an event that you're organizing, or other kinds of things where you work together with your peers and with your colleagues. So I like it. I mean, it's yet another app in the ecosystem of Microsoft. So I think we have to find out maybe a little bit how this will take place. Does it replace maybe a channel in a team, or will it integrate more into a channel in a team? Will it replace Whiteboard or not? So there's a little bit of overlap with other products, I guess. But I really like what I saw. It's a nice new addition in the Microsoft 365 suite, I guess.
Yeah. So when they announced that, did they also see or describe where we can run this? So is it a standalone app, or you can integrate it into Teams or email, or like where can you launch it from? Do you always have to launch a new desktop app called Microsoft Loop, or is it going to be there in the context of whatever you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's so the app is a separate app. So you can indeed launch Microsoft Loop as an app, and there you can access the pages and the workspaces that you're a member of. But these components that I just talked about, you can leverage these components in other Microsoft 365 applications as well. So when you have this table or this node, you can bring it into a Teams chat or in a channel conversation as well. And then when you update it there, it will immediately update right on that loop page where you collect all the components as well. So you can bring the components to other places within the Microsoft 365 suite. And I think that's nice. That's quite powerful.
It is. I already have this many use cases where I can see that this makes sense, where I have the app and I can do things, but I can see the data in real time in perhaps a tab in Teams or somewhere where I'm controlling budgets or my project or compliance, whatever. And then I get some data from the Loop components, then just immediately sent over to the same place. So I have like my one point that I go to get the dashboard of data, which then could include this. So I do see quite some use cases for this. So it's going to be interesting to see when we can take this for a spin to see how that can kind of fit into the business we have today.
I think this will require us to get used to one particular thing, and that's the dynamic changing of content in something that we've always seen as maybe a piece of static content. Because now when you have a chat message in Teams, that used to be just a message. And whenever I would go down in the thread, when I would scroll up, it would still be the same message. Or in an email, where you can also bring in a loop component. If I receive an email, that's a static piece of content. And now it's not anymore. When we are going to bring in these loop components, it might be that the content actually changes. So the next time I open up the chat message or the email, the content is different. And we're not used to that. So it might take a little bit of getting used to as well. But yeah, I agree with you. I definitely see a lot of use cases.
All right. Yeah, I think that's going to be fun and challenging, but fun to see. So Jussi, on your list, what do we have?
This is a bit of a set of features and capabilities that are a bit of a sleeper in the sense that they don't have the dashy headlines of something major happening. But it seems that Azure Arc, which is the central piece of Microsoft's hybrid and edge and on-premises connectivity, as well as multi-cloud, that seems to be expanding at a fairly rapid rate. So now Azure Arc gets an update for Azure Stack HCI, so the hyper-converged infrastructure, but there's also support for Azure Machine Learning, meaning that if you have a powerful GPU, let's say on a server at home, like normal people usually have when they work in IT, then you can leverage that GPU on premises and have that ship stuff to your Azure subscription using Azure Arc. And one addition to this one is that with Logic apps, we can now have the disconnected scenarios. I can run a Logic app locally without any connectivity back to Azure, but that still leverages Azure Arc eventually if I want to connect back to the public cloud. So it's interesting to see that Azure Arc started out as this fairly tiny capability that simply allowed you to ship your log files from your VMs to Azure. And now it seems to be this all-governing capability to allow you to do multi-cloud on-premises disconnected scenarios, offsites, and I'm sort of anxious to see how big Azure Arc is eventually going to be.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Working a lot on the Azure side, this is interesting. I like this fact that you can leverage the GPU or the resources you have on your local machine and then do processing in the cloud or send the data up. It opens up a world of capabilities for a lot of business cases as well. So definitely looking forward to that.
Do we know what the pricing model will be for this? I mean, do I have to pay to use my own GPU on my own desktop computer, or how does that work?
So for basic admin stuff like shipping logs, that's typically part of Azure Arc as is. So nothing to plan ahead for that. But for anything else with Kubernetes management, data management like SQL Server and whatnot, there's per minute billing for the capabilities that you use. But I guess I think it's in preview, so pricing is not available for the machine learning bit. I guess that as long as you utilize whatever you have, that obviously is not being charged. But if you ship back something to Azure using Azure Arc, then there's probably some sort of additional charge for bandwidth and or capabilities that you might utilize.
Makes sense.
All right, cool. So Maarten, what's on your list?
One more thing that I thought is quite powerful and quite important is one of the OneDrive announcements that they did. There were a couple of new features that they announced for OneDrive and a couple of nice features as well. Simple one is they are changing the dialog where you can see the permission on a certain file in your OneDrive. So you can just go to manage access and you see in one overview, you will see who you shared this file with, any anonymous links that you created on that item, any groups that you shared it with, etc. So all in one overview and the entire sharing of that certain file. I think that was, well, maybe a little bit overdue even, because you can share so much stuff in OneDrive and it's pretty hard to manage all of that. And now they've made it a whole lot easier. So I think that's nice. One more that I really liked is if you have a shared folder, if someone shares a folder with you, you can now place that folder in a subfolder of your own OneDrive environment. So you can just place that shared folder wherever you like it. So maybe underneath a project because you're working in a project and you can place that shared folder there. So that's a nice feature. But finally, the one that stood out for me is the fact that they're making a progressive web app out of OneDrive. And in fact, that's already available. So if you now go in your browser to OneDrive, you can go to extensions or to apps, and then you can see that you see OneDrive there and you can install it. And then you have a progressive web app, OneDrive as a PWA in your Windows environment. And why do I think that's a biggie or a nice announcement? Because it gives you a more of an app feeling instead of a web browser feeling. So you can pin it in your start menu. You can start it up when you log on to Windows, things like that. But also it gives you the opportunity to create something like an app, even though you do not have permissions to maybe install something from the Microsoft Store or even a local install a local file. Right. So people who are very when you have a laptop from your organization and you don't have any admin rights and you're not allowed to install something from the Microsoft Store, you can still create an app for OneDrive in your start menu. I think it's nice. I like it, and you see that more and more, right, with the PWAs popping up for everything. And I like it that they've now made it available for OneDrive as well.
I think it's pretty powerful with the PWAs. And in the last year or the last couple of years, we see a lot of apps being made available directly from the web. You could just pin it and say, I want this on my desktop. Same on the phone, exactly the same experience. You can go to the phone and say, I want to pin this on my how do you call it on the phone? The desktop, on my screen, on the home screen, I think you call it. So you can do that, and it's the same app. It's just rendered differently on the phone or downsized, and I really like that. So I guess this is a step in the right direction. And perhaps personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the sync client for OneDrive. I do everything online already today, so I always go to my OneDrive in the browser. With this, I don't have to go to the browser even. I can just pin this as an app on my desktop. So definitely helpful. I didn't know about that, so that's definitely something I'm going to try out. Interesting to see more things happening in this space. I saw a lot of talk about progressive web apps or PWAs some time ago, but then in the Microsoft ecosystem, we didn't really see a lot of that happening. So I really like this because hopefully this is just one small door being opened for a lot of apps that can now be deployed, if you will, or run as apps on the desktop with the desktop experience. All right, so Jussi, do you have still something else on your mind that was a top highlight from the conference?
Plenty. Perhaps we've covered most of those. Let me quickly close up on my side with the industry clouds. So I was watching the keynotes, and on last Ignite, which was in March 2021, it feels like it was 5 years ago, but it was less than a year ago. There was a casual mention of industry clouds. But now the new main picture of the Microsoft cloud platforms prominently had all the different industry clouds, like for sustainability and finance and manufacturing and so on. All of those were prominently placed on top of that main diagram. And for me, I haven't really had a chance to work specifically with many of the industry clouds yet, but that's probably something that I will invest time next year in really understanding the different offerings for different industries and when to use what, meaning when do we use something custom, when do we leverage something that's already available in there, and when do we do a mix between these two.
Yeah, I agree. I really like where Microsoft is going with this, and it's quite a Microsoft cloud agnostic as well. So I also like that. It's collaboration templates in Microsoft 365, but it's also maybe specific things in Dynamics for certain things that for customer things or support things that you work with, and it's also maybe a different IoT approach or a different IoT gateway or template, because in retail you use IoT differently than in manufacturing. Yeah, it's really cool to see how they go across the entire Microsoft cloud stack and try to build out something for a specific industry. I'm excited about that as well. Really nice stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening, and just having the dialogue here today, I realized that because I thought I was kind of caught up about what happened at Ignite and the major announcement. Half of the things you told me today are news to me, so obviously I missed quite a few things. So it's like drinking from the fire hose. There's a lot of information coming out here. So there's definitely I have a long bucket list now of things I need to read. But I have one thing on my side. So actually, I also have quite a few points, but you covered some of them already. One of my favorite things coming out of Ignite, and I think this is something I want to highlight for people already working in the space of maybe compliance and security in 365 or Azure, Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. And that could be a confusing name to some. I hope that there will be a clarified story about the branding and name and where it fits into the versus the other Defender products. But it's just the formerly known as Microsoft Cloud App Security. So if you use that, the MCAS, which we'll probably refer to it for quite some time, the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps is the new name of Microsoft Cloud App Security. And there's a couple of new things that they announced in this area. So I work with compliance and security and a lot of these things. And one thing that caught my eye here in the midst of quite a lot of things coming is something called app governance. And when we talk about apps, it can be an Azure app using the Microsoft Graph APIs or some 365 APIs or whatever API you have. But in this case, they talked specifically about the Microsoft Graph APIs, and that's what caught my attention. So with app governance, you can now see how those apps are being utilized. And traditionally, you could see things like high-risk apps. It's a high risk because it has full control of your SharePoint files in your entire tenant. Okay, that's a pretty high risk because we don't know the app code. We don't know who's actually building the app, perhaps, but it has full control to delete or download all my data. So that's a high risk. These things, they still exist. One thing that is new in this area that I really like is app behavior. So with app governance, we can see the app behavior, and we can see when anomalous data access happen. We can see when new apps have a high volume of data access. We can create governance policies, so like proactive policies saying we will only allow this, or we will put an audit trail when this or that happens, or reactive policies saying if this happened, take this action, so we can kind of remediate things as they happen. So I really like this new integration. So it's a rebrand of the Microsoft Cloud App Security, but with this added benefit of app governance, it hopefully brings a better kind of transparency into how we consent to apps in the Microsoft ecosystem, what those apps are actually doing, and then using, as they said also in the announcement here, use machine learning and patterns for users for the in-app behavior, in-app analytics. What is the app doing? How are the users using the app? What permissions are being requested? All these different things are then combined, and they apply some machine learning to give you the insights that you might need in order to understand if this is a risk or not. Because today, one of the things I have a challenge with, it's doable, but it's quite the challenge, is to understand over the last 5 years, maybe we consented to 1,000 apps in our organization. Which one of them do we still use? Which one of them are high risk? Okay, now there's 50 apps flagged with high risk because the permissions are really granting full access to a lot of things. How do I now know if anyone is using it? Is it being used in a good way or not? And it's the process around this can be pretty tricky. So I hope with the app behavior inside of the app governance inside of Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, and that we will get some transparency and insights into all of these third-party and line of business apps that we use in the Microsoft 365 platform to be able to see the status and get alerts on activities and then take action. So definitely excited about that one. So perhaps more on the admin side than the collaboration side, but in the end, if we can control and make sure that we mitigate the risk we can enable better collaboration and not being afraid of unleashing all the power of Microsoft 365 to the users. And we want to be able to do that without being afraid in doing that anything can happen. So I think another step in the right direction to stay in control of your environment, and hopefully when we can take it for a spin, which we can do right now. So if you are listening to this and you want to take a spin, you have to sign up for a free trial for the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And then when you have that, you have to sign up for the trial for the app governance inside of that. So we'll put the links as well on the blog post to go with that. So if anyone want to try it out, you can do that. So I'm excited about that one. Otherwise, obviously, it's the 800 new emojis I'm mostly excited about, but otherwise, this one is also good.
And I wonder when Microsoft will be launching Microsoft Defender for Metaverse. I'm sure there will be a Defender for that pretty soon. Yeah.
Yeah, and the question is that going to be like, if you sign into the portal, the admin portal of that, do you have to do that in augmented reality or with a pair of goggles and go in, like in the hacker movies you used to see back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, in the hacker movies, when they hacked something, you saw 3D boxes, you flew into the Matrix kind of stuff, and you shut down a box in the virtual screen, and then you hacked the system. Maybe this is what we're looking for in the future.
Yeah. So those movies were right. That's
sci-fi is always leading the way.
yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. So that was the thing on my list. Do you guys have anything else on your list from top of mind that would be interesting to know?
I think we've covered most of it on my side.
Yeah, same for me.
All right. So it's not a small list. I have compiled a list of all the things we talked about, and I will put the links also into the blog post so people can go check them out. Hopefully we'll be able to explore some of these things. I already know now I'm going to waste a lot of time trying to understand everything that was announced during Ignite. There's a lot of things going on, but this helps a lot. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to join me in this call. It was insightful. I learned a couple of things, and I am probably going to rush out now, click all the links, try to figure out what I want to try out first. So thanks again for coming on, and thanks everyone for tuning in. And I hope we can do this again in the future.
I hope so too. Thanks.